Hello and welcome to Unique Wargaming Terrain. I'm John, and from the last video I said to you to collect some bottle caps, bottle lids, drink lids, because I'm going to show you a really simple piece of terrain. So simple. Now, some of the techniques I'm going to show you when I'm making this is not for you to go, oh wow, that's amazing, just for you to just make simple, cost-effective terrain. This piece, in a number of 2, 3 months, 4 months time, we'll revisit again and we'll embellish it a bit more, and you'll see a lot more new things done to it, and you'll go, wow, some of the simple stuff that you showed us at the beginning, we're now able to add to it and make it a lot better. So first thing you need is a piece of basing. Now this is weatherboard, and all I've done is roughly the two edges up here and here are 95% straight, as in a straight cut. Now at the top here and the bottom here is just rough and smooth. The roughened needs to be smooth. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a piece of fine grit sandpaper, a blade. Now this blade isn't sharp, but it's sharp enough to cut this. So what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to touch the sides, because the reason for that is, when you make another piece of this, you can put them together and they slide up nicely. So we're going to take the blade and we're just going to slowly bevel the edge. Right, so as you can see, it's slightly beveled. I'm going to do the same to the front again. Now when you're doing this, be careful of the corners. You do not want to bevel the corners, because you want them as flat as possible. So when the next piece lines up, within a millimetre or so, they will slot together. Now this material is brilliant, because when you're beveling the edges, even if it's a bit jagged, when you come to painting it, it'll just give you nice texture. So let's get this last little bit done. Right, so now we have something that looks a little bit like that. Okay. Then what we do is, we're going to take a bit of fine sandpaper and just sand the edges of it. Doesn't have to be a heavy sand, just a gentle sand. What you want to do is get rid of all the fluffy bits and flip it over. I don't know if you can see on here, there's a couple of little lippy bits that are hanging out, so that's why we use fine sandpaper. If you start cutting your blade, what will happen is you end up cutting up more than you need, and then you'll have to cut more and more, and eventually end up with nothing. Right, so that's done. Edges are nice and beveled. Now, when you're doing this, you might end up with a little lip along that edge that you want to keep straight. So if that's the case, give it a nice, gentle sand. I mean, you got to remember, the aim of these edges are not to have them beveled, so they sit up nicely to each other. Right, as I said in the last video, you can use super glue if you want to glue the lids on, or you can use hot glue. I'm going to go for hot glue. So take these lids out. Now there's a few things to watch out for with these lids. Some of them have a little dome on the top, sort of oval shape. You want to try and avoid using them ones, because it won't sit flat on your base. Some are bigger sizes, so what you want to try and do is try and get two that are the same sort of size. Okay, so they sit nicely on top of each other. And there's the last thing to look out for. Some of them have a little pip in the middle. If you get one with a little pip in the middle, take clippers, snip, simple. Now what we're going to do now is, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to allocate the lids that we're going to use and put them down so we know roughly where they're going to go, and try and allocate them in sets of 2. So you've got the bottom one and the top one. Okay, so then we know what we're doing. We're on the case. Now you've got a rough idea of what you're doing. So what you want to do is take them off. Make sure when you're doing it, make sure that the lids don't hang too far off the front. So you can see that they're not hanging too far across the front here, because when we're going to texture this, we don't want them hanging over and then try and texture and it looks weird. Okay, now when you're doing the base for this as well, you can actually make the base longer if you want to, but there's no need to do that, because in the new rules of 40k, especially for barricades and piping and stuff like that, they have a rule where you can be within an inch of said terrain and you get the benefits from it. Whereas some other pieces of terrain, now you have to be in the base of it, like the terrain's base. So with piping and barricades, this is what we're doing, a barricade. We don't need to do too much base work on it. We just need to give it a base of itself. So take the hot glue gun, some glue on the bottom, place down. Now you place like this. So the top of the lid first goes on the base. Okay. You then take your next one, the same size, and just get a little bead of hot glue around the rim of it, and you want to try and get it on there almost perfect. Then just quickly rub your finger around just to try and get rid of any excess hot glue from around the join. Yeah. Then next one. And the next one you want to try and put up as close as possible to the first one. Okay. You want to try and eliminate as much gap between them as possible, because there's the point of having a barricade if there's gaps between it. Burn your fingers with the hot glue, as I always do. Right, and then you want to take just the wispy bits off. You'll find them everywhere. They're so annoying, but you just want to try and get rid of them, because you don't want to be painting it, and you're finding them when you're trying to paint. I'm not the best at using hot glue, but I find it a lot easier. With most tools and materials, the more you use it, the better it becomes, and the more skilled you become at it. So, and then what we do, we take our fine sandpaper and we just want to give it a gentle sand. You want to give a gentle sand across the top here, just to rough it up a little bit, and give it a gentle sand along here, yeah, on the actual lids itself. Now you're sanding the lids on around the lids. The reason you're doing that is to get rid of any excess hot glue, and to just rough it up a little bit, so when you come to the painting stage, it's got a bit more texture, a bit more definition. can see here, you want to try and get rid of that. A little bit of hot glue there. Just work around it with the sandpaper. It doesn't matter if you end up sanding bits of the lid away, because again, it just adds more. It stops it being unified and gives it a bit more different textures. And don't be afraid to really give the tops a good. There's a top of these are supposed to be where you're having a marine or an Eldari, or a troop with a heavy weapon or with a gun, or resting it on there shooting away. So there is going to be scuff marks from the barrels of the guns and magazines of the guns and everything else. Now here we are. Okay, I see what you're going, but it's not. We're not there yet. The next thing you want to do is get yourself a container for some water. Some filler. And the lolly stick. Now you want to take a little bit of filler on your stick. Do a little dip in the water. Okay. And you want to go around, just around it. Trying to get to as close as possible between the lid and the base. Okay, and just try and clear as much of it in there as you can. Okay, what you want to do is you're trying to get in there to get rid of the join line between the lid and the base. Okay, but this also gives you texture. So as it dries, you'll get a lot of texture on it as well, which, depending on what way you're painting it, it can give you a very different effects. You can also, at this point, if you really wanted to, get some gravel or some sand or something like that and put it in the filler mix, because then it just gives it more texture. But that's entirely up to you. Let's get this done. The reason you dip it into the water as well is to give it a little bit more smooth flowing. So you can also get it into those little hard to reach places. Any filler will do. Doesn't matter. Any filler will do. I've bought expensive filler before. It does exactly the same thing as the cheap filler. It just might take a little bit longer drying, or it may not feel the same. Right. So here we are now. Okay. So it's had filler mix on it, and all the way around, as much into the grooves as I can. Just go across the edges and just swipe any extra away, because then you want this as flat as possible so it can butt up against each other. And another thing to avoid when you're doing filler mixing, don't have it fluffy. Try and have it smooth, because if it's fluffy and you have models near it or models on it, they'll knock the end of the little nip of it off and it looks silly. So now you leave that to dry. Depending on where you're storing it, it could be 4 hours, 5 hours, it could be 15 hours, depends. Then what you do then is you want to undercoat the whole thing black when it's finished. The reason you want to do it black is because we're going to paint the lid silver. so to give it like a metallic feel. So what I've done, so I've already gone ahead and prepped another piece to show you. So here's painted silver, yeah, and the base I've painted burnt umber. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to put some paint on it. So what I'm doing, the first thing I'm going to do is take some Steel Legion drab. Now you don't need a lot of this. This is just simply for dry brushing. I'm going to take some out of the pot. Get rid of the excess on my bit of paper. I'm going to take the terrain piece. I'm just going to dry brush it. Dry brush along the edges as well. So where you beveled it, it's going to really pop and really stand out. It doesn't matter at this stage with the round of it if you end up putting a bit too much here and there, because when you come to the next stage, when you put flocks and stuff like that, you can just flock over the bit that you don't like. Again, it doesn't matter if you get some of this on the actual piece, the lids, because it looks like dirt that's gone up into it and it's ingrained onto it. Now, the lighting's very bad in this area, but you can see that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, the first thing I do is I'm going to take some beaten copper. Now this is a very old colour, but any sort of coppery colour will do. And I'm going to repeat the same process again, but I'm going to do it on the actual lids themselves. So I'm going to give them a quick dry brush here and there. And this will give it a very rustic looking feel. Now, you can see that. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a bit of Screaming Skull, and I'm going to give another little dry brush on the steel as well. But this is going to be a very, very light dry brush. Virtually nothing. Just to give it a bit of highlight. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some Phosian Camo Shade, and there's a very tiny little bit left in this. I'm going to take a dab of it. I'm just going to run it over the top. So let it run down. Just mix up a little bit. Just to give it a bit of a grimy look from the top. Okay. Now, at this point, you'll start panicking and going, "Oh no, the camo shade looks, it's destroyed what I'm doing." No, it doesn't. As it dries, it will just dry and show you everything that's underneath. So you won't need to worry about any of that. And if you look at it afterwards and go, "Oh no, actually, I used a bit too much camo shade," then just repeat the same process without the camo shade. Yeah. So as you can see, I've moved it over here, so it's better lighting. It's still a little bit wet from the camo shade, but you can see, very simple, very simple piece of terrain, very cost effective. And you can see that the whiteboard that's on is just a piece of whiteboard, just to give you an idea of, well, I didn't want to clear everything and just put them down, but just give you an idea, some other simple pieces of terrain that actually, it just slots in nicely. You wouldn't be lost on a battlefield. So, if you've liked this video, please hit the share, like, subscribe and turn on notifications for future videos. I was thinking about the next video to do something similar, but for a fantasy board. So that's probably what it's going to be, and thanks for watching, guys.